Hi, everyone. This is Andrew, co-host of Pocket Politics, and welcome to episode three, season three. We're in for a special episode today as Pocket Politics welcomes Tommy Hough, a Democrat running for San Diego's District 6 City Council position. Tommy, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for being here. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us why you're here, what you hope to do over in San Diego, and we'll jump right into it. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it. My name is Tommy Hough, and as you indicated, I'm running for San Diego City Council. I'm a Democrat, and there are 9 seats on San Diego City Council. All of them will be held by Democrats come this election. I'm actually running for the last seat that's held by a Republican. He is outgoing. My opponent is also a Democrat. So we had a very anticlimactic moment during the primary when we made the entire city council fully Dem, at least come December. So it includes a number of neighborhoods. If you're in the San Diego area, it includes Mira Mesa, Kearny Mesa, Sereno Valley, Miramar, a few areas of a Western Scripps Ranch, Rancho Encantada, and then University City and the UTC area. So it's a big area. Council districts in San Diego, they run about 160,000 people per district. So they're very considerably sized. And again, we have 9 of them throughout the city. I was the endorsed Democratic candidate for the same seat in this old iteration in 2018. I ran against the incumbent Republican in that race. We lost. We only lost by about 3 points and a couple thousand votes. It wasn't much, even though we are outspent 30-1 by our local public broadcasting system estimate. So it was pretty considerable. And yet we did as well as we did back in 2018 because we walked and we knocked and we talked and we got familiar with our neighbors. We got acquainted with our neighbors. And that's the same thing that we're doing this time around. During the primary in 2022, we had my main opponent in this race and then a Republican who was also running. And we essentially tied, my opponent and I. The difference was he spent about $200,000. We spent less than $20,000. And we essentially got the same result. Why was that? I didn't send out a shred of mail during the primary. And yet we nearly got the same result. We talk with our neighbors. We talk about the issues that matter. We're trying to not only reflect the neighborhood, but stay out in front on the issues that they're bringing to us, and also leading with our values as Democrats as well. It's been difficult. We did not get the Democratic Party endorsement for this particular race, so it's been a bit of an uphill climb, but we feel very, very competitive heading into the final few days of the election. And no matter what winds up happening, I'm so very proud of my team. We've done so well, and we've stayed neck and neck the entire time, and we can tell right now from the advertisements that my opponent is running that he is very worried and very scared. He represents the big money interests. I'm the grassroots campaign looking out for our neighbors and the middle class.
Thanks, Tommy. So I'm Terry Crandall, the CEO of Voting Smarter. I am a San Diego State alum.
Look at you! Look at
yeah,
you! They got the Aztec gear on and everything.
Of
That's
course,
great.
just for you, trying to make our school proud. The some of the things you said really ring in my ears. Whether it was the spending factor, whether it was an all Democrat council. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. That's different than when I was down there.
Oh yeah.
And it's and so tonight I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how money has influenced these races, right? You're sort of it seems to be the contradiction to the idea that the person with the most money wins because you're pounding the pavement, you're shaking the hands, you're meeting your constituents and neighbors. And so we've got a list of questions that we're going to be asking a series of politicians over the year. And so I'm going to go through a few of those. But I'd like to know before we get into that, why are you running for city council? Like what was the thing? I know that you founded the environmental group for Democrats
Oh
in
yeah.
San Diego. I know you were on the air there on the radio for years
Mhm.
and very connected down there. But what made you say, look, I gotta go get in elected office to make things better?
Gold Coast Drive. It's
Hmm.
the worst road in the city. It goes through the heart of my neighborhood. It is emblematic of the neglect my neighborhood has suffered from a lack of attention from downtown and a rather hubristic downtown that has really centralized power and is trying to find different ways to block community groups and local organizations from really being heard in a meaningful way. And it's emblematic when you look at the condition of our roads. We have the worst roads in the city here in Mira Mesa, in my neighborhood. It's the largest community within District 6 for about 80,000 people.
Mhm.
It takes forever to get a street light replaced. Now, that's not unusual for government, but it shouldn't take a year. We've got parks that really need to be restored and rehabilitated. We have infrastructure here that's 50 years old that winds up getting replaced in fits and starts. You know, revenue has always been an issue with the city of San Diego. City's trying to pass a trash tax right now to sort of make up for some of that revenue shortfall, especially since we're losing our COVID subsidies after 2 years for this budget cycle as well. But I'm running because I am tired of seeing our neighborhood and my neighbors, my blue collar, my hardworking neighbors, some of whom have owned these homes for years, many of whom were immigrants to this nation, being forgotten about, being dismissed, and that the concerns that they bring to the city again and again are simply not heard and not acted upon. That's going to change when I'm elected.
So, Tommy, for those who haven't had the pleasure of the sunshine of San Diego, like you and I have, your district, it seems, based on my recollection of the area, it stretches northeast, and is very far. Is it? Does it contain some of the furthest points from downtown San Diego?
You're starting to get far away from downtown San Diego with the district. It's more east-west trending now with the latest round of redistricting, but almost all of it is located entirely north of Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. And Miramar is one of those demarcation lines along the 15 freeway that downtown really determines how far out in the woods you are. And there are other areas and some sizable communities of San Diego that are further north than where we are, but we have an abundant population, a very, very diverse population. But at the time, there was a prejudice about Mira Mesa that it was out in the sticks. And this was back in the early 70s when this area was being built. In
Yeah.
fact, Pete Wilson at one time was the mayor, old school Republican guy, right? And he said at the time, he said, no more Mira Mesas, because the way this area was developed, the developers just ran roughshod. They never built schools, they never built parks, they never built fire stations. And so over time, this area has really grown into a real community because of the advocacy of neighbors. But the neighbors had to get on the ground and make that happen and make their concerns heard downtown. And downtown has listened and responded in fits and starts. And I think that proximity away from City Hall, it does have something to do with it.
Well, and the demographics of Mira Mesa are somewhat atypical from the broader demographics of San Diego. Is if it's the same as when I was there, is that still true?
Yeah, I think so. It's certainly it's the most ethnically diverse district, certainly north of Interstate 8. Interstate 8 is another one of those, unfortunately, artificial demarcation lines that people often use to determine where in the city you are. But yeah, we are indeed a very ethnically diverse area. This has one of the highest concentrations of AAPI or Asian ethnicities in the city of San Diego. With the current redistricting, it comes to about 40% right now. But we have a number of neighbors who, if you walk around here, you'll hear people speaking Russian. You'll hear Farsi. You'll hear a number of different Asian languages. A lot of our Filipino neighbors speak Tagalog at home, Vietnamese, Cantonese, other Chinese variations. So it's not unusual.
And that was I mean, I was in the food in Mira Mesa is fantastic. I was up there all the time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
COVID knocked out some of the mom and pops, which is a shame. And so part of what we have to do is make sure that, we're making it possible and giving the room for some of those mom and pop outlets to get back on their feet. But thank you. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay. I mean that you can see your passion for why you're running, and I I loved your answer. It was very specific. Um, you also mentioned the way money is used in these races, and
Yeah.
so um, for those of us who've never run for city council, even though some of us might be considering it, what would you say? What is the amount of money? Sorry, I have my list of questions here. What is the amount of money you would say that a candidate generally has to raise to have a successful campaign for San Diego City Council?
Well, to have a successful campaign, you want to have funding. When you have the money in place, then you can plan. And then when you can plan, you can execute. So anyone who's considering a run for public office, you want to have some kind of fundraising stream or mechanism that you can rely upon. Some politicians will spend several years putting together commitments. So when their committee finally goes online, they make their first round of calls and it's like, okay, it's go time. I need you to drop that money in now. But I would say for a San Diego City Council race these days to be truly very competitive. I'd say you'd want to be up at least around $300,000, at least for the general.
And so let's put that in perspective. There's nine seats. Now, are they all up in an election, or is it some are up and some are not in an election?
Yeah, this year it's an even numbered election, so all the even numbered seats are up this year, and then presidential years it's odd numbered. But
Yeah,
it's
and
weird because my race is the only one that's an open seat. There are incumbents in all the other even numbered seats, so there are varying degrees of likelihoods that they will be reelected. And this District 6 is very unusual. It's the only open seat this cycle.
I see, I see. And that obviously lends itself to more contentiousness and more money being needed because there's a fight versus that's open versus an incumbent, someone who already has the position.
Right, right. Yeah, it's very competitive. It's competitive in a way that's very different from when I ran 4 years ago against an incumbent in 2018.
I see. I see. That makes a lot of sense. I imagine those first calls, like before you run, like you said, sort of have got to be really hard, right? Like, or is it not like so? So, what's the hardest thing about raising money for a political campaign? Would you say?
The most difficult thing is being consistent with making time to do it and having a very, very effective list. And lists come from a lot of different places, but typically when you're running for office, you already known to a sizable pool of people, and you know that you usually will sit down and figure out rate like who has got certain volumes of money, who are likely able to go and make X or Y kind of commitment. And usually the first calls are actually pretty easy because you're reaching out to your most loyal friends, loyal supporters, loyal backers, people who've already made commitments to you. In my case, it was very easy starting off because I had my list from 2018. So I actually had a jump on it. Now my opponent is essentially a professional fundraiser. He's an executive director for a nonprofit. So he already had a much larger and wider stream to draw from. And on top of that, if you're talking to people who are used to donating, and they're used to writing $5,000 checks. Well, the maximum in our race is $650. So for them, writing a check for $650, it's like putting on your shoes. I was calling a cousin of mine in North Carolina, and he and I probably don't see each other eye to eye politically, but he wanted to help and he was interested. And so I'm talking to him and I'm giving him the pitch, and he says, well, Tommy, I mean, I have kids in college right now. I can't make this giant commitment. I'm like, hey, it's $650 is the maximum. I mean, I'm not. And he started laughing. He was in the car and he was just laughing. And I realized he's like, it's $650. How many people do you have to call? I'm like, well, you got to call an awful lot. I mean, it's not like North Carolina where you live, where it's like $10,000 or something, and where that's the limit. Or even if you're running for Congress, I mean, one person can donate several $1,000s. So for city council, one could argue it's good that there is a pretty hard limit on the amount of money somebody can give. But for most of my supporters, I'm an environmentalist, and most of my neighbors, they've never given to a political candidate before. I don't know moneyed interest. I don't know the wealthy people in this town. I know my supporters. So if they're writing a check for $25, that's probably the only time they've ever done that in their entire lives. And my base, they have largely funded this campaign, and it's through these tiny contributions. So it's hard to match up. And look, I mean, there'll be some restaurants or some businesses, and magically everybody who works there winds up giving $650. Well, that's nice. I just don't have those kinds of connections. And so when you're a true person from the middle class, it makes it's very, very difficult to do that. I put in some of my own money to fund this campaign, and you almost have to do that if you're not really in with the moneyed interests. And when you don't necessarily have party support as a Democrat, if labor sort of isn't so sure if they wanted to support you, it makes it even more difficult. But let's remember, and I think the important thing to remember here, and I'm not trying to get in front on the questions, it's not even the money that you yourself raise. It's the political action committees and the independent expenditures. Yeah. And if you look at who's hammering me right now in the mailbox, it's these PACs and these IEs that are faceless, that have anonymous names, that give outrageous sums of money. And that's really where it makes the difference, because that kind of money it's, you have to go and dig out how much money Amazon gave to this particular pack, or how much this particular developer gave to that. And good luck competing with that kind of cash.
Yeah, and that comes to some of my other questions. Like, what would you say? I mean, obviously the max is 650 of the direct campaign contributions to you.
Yeah, for an individual, yeah.
Yeah, what would you say your average, if you don't know the number, that's fine, but if you had to guess, what would you say an average the average donation was?
$50.
Yeah, which is honestly high if you think
It's
about
great.
it.
I mean,
That's high.
yeah, we're ecstatic when we get contributions. When I'm calling my neighbors and calling friends and calling, environmentalists and everyone. I mean, any contribution means a great deal. And we have clearly demonstrated that both in 2018 and in the primary that we do a very, very good job of husbanding our resources. But every time we've really been in these David and Goliath fights where, we're up against just outrageous amounts of money. Now, I didn't spend any money really in the primary, so I saved it all to send some mail out in the general election. And it's had an impact, and I think it's landed well. But at the same time, it's not just my opponent's money; it's the party funds. I mean, the amount of there is no limit to how much money you can funnel through a party, and then you get the member communications benefits on the back end. Now, when I ran in 2018, I was the endorsed candidate, so I was able to benefit from that. And we had one union that really was very, very supportive of us, but that was it. We didn't have sugar daddies. I'm not the sort of candidate that attracts those kinds of sugar daddies. That's
Why?
not
Why not?
because I'm an environmentalist, and
Mhm.
I have principles and I have values.
Yeah.
And I have issues with some of our friends with our trades unions, because if they want to go and build an office park in a creek that's protected as multiple species conservation program land, that even our local Mira Mesa community plan says you shouldn't build in riparian areas or in its uplands, I have a problem with that. When you want to build an office park, not even housing, an office park next to a nature preserve that's one of the most vast and fascinating and special nature preserves in northern San Diego County, which contains some habitat that is not preserved anywhere else in the city, I have a problem with that. When you want to go and build projects that could be damaging to golden eagle habitat, you name the kind of habitat, near parks, near forest land, I'm going to be the guy in the room who says, let's think twice about that. I'm an environmentalist and I'm a conservationist, and I always have been. And part of the reason that I'm running for office is because of my environmental work. As you mentioned, yeah, I was the co-founder of San Diego County Democrats for Environmental Action. Part of the reason we began that organization was not only to inform Democrats and to enlighten Democrats and give them a place to go, a workshop place to go where they can really hear about environmental best practices, but to hold Democrats accountable when they're making bad decisions. And that was influenced by my time when I was working in Oregon. And I was working for an organization called Oregon Wild, which is a wilderness advocacy organization. And you'd have all these Democrats saying, well, I don't think we should be drilling willy-nilly for gas and oil in Utah, and we shouldn't cut the Tongass rainforest. But if you want to clear cut the hillside behind your house, you come see me in my office. That's not appropriate behavior when you look at where Democrats are on climate change, on the environment. And I don't believe that environmental matters should be handled or thrown away as political currency. In fact, I push back against that. That's part of the reason I do this. And so as a result, sometimes the folks and the developers and we don't always necessarily get along. But they'll take turns saying I'm this or that or the other thing. But at the end of the day, I'm principled, and I stand for our middle class neighbors. I stand for our neighborhoods, as the sign says, and I stand for our environment. I've always been very, very clear and very transparent on that.
Yeah, I wanna ask you something about that. But before I do, Audit, I believe you have a question for.
Yeah, so when you say like you're trying to focus on your kind of principles to get elected into office, how do you say like, well, let's take a little softer stance on some environmental issues so I could get the support from other unions to get me into office, to get a more guaranteed spot in office, and then from there kind of legislate the environment? Why do you say like, no, we're sticking with this environmental ground, even if it's
Well, the funny
uphill
thing
battle?
is that I don't say we're sticking to this environmental ground because I haven't had any conversations with them. They've got my phone number. I serve as a county planning commissioner. I'm an easy guy to find. But when folks don't want to talk to you, and they're not letting you know about where they stand on things, I've never said no to a conversation. I've never said
You're
no to
here.
hearing someone out.
You're here, right? And
yeah,
and Monday Night Football's on, and you're here, so we appreciate
right.
it.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
so for some of our viewers and listeners, $650 doesn't seem like enough to buy a candidate, right? Like that doesn't seem like enough for a developer to buy you, right? And it probably, and not that you're for sale, or your opponent. So you mentioned something about PACs. So for those that don't understand, can you talk to me about and our listeners about how larger donors with large individual interests funnel money to people running in your district, and what your relationship with PACs are?
I don't have any relationship with PACs.
So yeah,
You know, I couldn't, you know, I can tell you some PACs that are spending against our campaign right now. But you know, this is the way politics, this is the business of politics.
Yeah.
There is nothing unique about San Diego. It's not terribly unique about my race, about how these things operate. This is the result of 2010 and the US Supreme Court and money trumps speech. And it doesn't matter what letter you have after your name, because I got Democrats who are taking Republican talking points to attack me with. They will say anything. And when you look at the amount of money that's that is invested in these candidates, in these independent expenditures and these PACs, you can see why they'll say anything. And when you have that level of money, and there is no one who's going to hold you accountable, the temptation is clear. And that's a problem that we're going to have to deal with more and more as we keep moving forward. And it's a curious problem that we have here in a place like Southern California, which for a long time, and you know this, Terry, you know, we had a lot of Republicans here, but now Democrats, by and large, you know, are in power in all of the counties, at least the coastal counties and the coastal cities. So you're seeing more and more Dem on Dem races, but you're still seeing the same tactics being used. You're seeing the same institutional money that has controlled these communities since 1945 being used, and they'll spend it, and they want something for it.
We're seeing the same problems, right? Things are not getting better, whether it's D on R or R on R or D on D. Where these intractable problems, which is evidence, you know, in anytime I can plug Voting Smarter, right, I'm going to take it. But that's why we're doing what we're doing, right? We're trying to equilibrate, you know, balance the playing field. So, you know, growing up, you would have been hard pressed to knock on my mom's door in Rancho Bernardo to get $50, even if she loved you, because we didn't have $50.
Yeah.
You know, but we donated plenty of money when we bought Stouffer's dinners or Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo.
Right.
and so that's, you know, when you brought up Citizens United, right? And so that obviously I ask everybody, what's your take on Citizens United? You don't believe that money trumps speech and corporations or people, it seems.
Yeah, money in politics, you have to look at it this way, okay? $650, whatever the sum may be. It's not about buying a particular vote. It's the corrosive long-term effects that money has on a legislator that slowly shrinks the universe of options you as a policymaker can think about, closes off different routes for solutions that you may be inclined to go. Well, I can't go there. That's a third rail. That's a landmine over there. I'm going to make these folks mad if I wind up going there. Now, our political system was not necessarily designed with that, but it very quickly, you know, made itself clear that was a result. Citizens United has exacerbated all the bad concerns that we have about money in politics, and has done so in a way that is slowly withering the options that policymakers can pursue. And I don't care if that's at the local, state, or federal level. That's really the truly sad thing about it.
I'm pretty sure that's going to make it into a clip. I mean, that was an amazing explanation, and I was struck back by it. So thank you for that, and I hope people take that to heart. It's not just about buying a specific vote. There's all these areas you can't even talk about or touch because there's too much money involved over there.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example of that. It's the cumulative effect of that. Like, for example, you know, Terry, you and I are in the state of California. California's had a Democratic majority in Sacramento for the last 12 years. And yet, you know, why aren't we getting why aren't we having greater strides in climate policy? Why is that always such an uphill battle? Because the oil and gas industry is still a major player in Sacramento. It was so difficult for Gavin Newsom just to sign policy to give setbacks for people in communities, working communities like Long Beach, so they're not necessarily living next to an oil well. Now, that seems like pretty sane policy that even if you were in Oklahoma or Colorado or Texas, probably wouldn't be that controversial. So why is it controversial here in California? Why did it take so long to pass that? It's oil and gas. And when we drive along I-5 and we go through the Lost Hills oil zone around Coalinga, you get very, very used to seeing all those oil derricks. But, you know, whether it's Chevron or whomever it may be, they cast a very, very long shadow in Sacramento, longer than I think anyone who lives in these coastal cities really realizes.
And I think they'd be surprised, right, given the stance of Governor Newsom, or the assumption that a Democratic legislature would bring. Andrew, audit, did you have other questions? Anything come to mind?
Right. Sure. Thanks, Terry. So, Tommy, I know we've been talking a lot about, money in politics and why, certain, people do these jobs. So for a San Diego City councilor, and, I'm not aware, is that a paid position? Is that the position, volunteer for? How does that work over there?
It is a full-time job. Yes, sir.
It is a full-time job.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Now, I serve as a San Diego County Planning Commissioner. That's an appointed position,
Mhm.
but I'm simply paid a stipend for that. So that's not quite a part-time job. But if you are a San Diego City Council member, I mean, there is a great deal to do. But there are only two cities in the entire county of San Diego that have full-time council members: the city of San Diego and Chula Vista.
Interesting.
And
You know,
Chula
it's
Vista is pretty big too. Yeah,
I bet.
yeah.
Yeah, I find it. I find it so different than over here because my state only being a population of a little bit over a million, where our state reps and state senators are only paid $100 a year. So it's very it's funny here the different perspectives, because if everyone thought New Hampshire paying our politician, we were like, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous.
Live free or die.
Yeah. Very good.
So,
I I
yeah,
think I'll ask another question. It's like one thing that I mean, I was born, lived my whole life in California. So
Ah,
I know that one thing that people, at least in California, ask for is like, the one complaint at least is like their tax bill. How do you say like, hey, we're gonna do all these environmental protections that may drive up your tax bill or increase the cost of certain aspects to people may not have that ability to, afford that increase? How do you say like, no, this policy is, really beneficial for, future generations? How do you say that? How do you make that case for your
well, the
policy?
funny thing is, Audit, is that the case has largely been made for a lot of these environmental protections, certainly in the city and I think at the state level too. And really, where we're at now, it's a matter of execution or a willingness to execute. And there are different approaches as to how one would do that. I mean, I believe that one of the best ways we can meet our climate action plan goals is to stop releasing carbon. So, I'm not really excited about pouring concrete because that's a very, very bad thing for the environment. Cutting trees is a very, very bad thing for the environment. Destroying habitat diversity is very bad for the environment. Look at what we're doing to the oceans right now. So in some ways, it's a matter of just breaking habits and breaking cycles that may not necessarily result in a net increase in someone's tax bill. I think some of the more nefarious things are things like we have a monopoly here in San Diego County, and San Diego Gas and Electric, which is owned by Semper Energy, which is a publicly traded corporation, which, as I think you guys are probably aware of, are in a lot of trouble in Northern California, owe a lot of money to victims of fires there. In some ways are working with the California Public Utilities Commission to subvert rooftop solar access. Now, that's hard to believe that would happen here in California, but that's occurring, and we haven't. I wish we were seeing more overt moves by the governor to prevent that. So I think in some cases we tend to ask the wrong question. It's not a matter of like, well, what can we do to make solar more affordable? The question is, why aren't we finding ways to work with all of our interest groups to subsidize or otherwise rooftop solar panels, so we can get as many rooftop solar panels on roofs for property owners who want it. And then we could wind up taking a bite out of the grid, and then we could wind up having, real battery storage with solar power and renewable electricity. And I think that's someplace where I think money that was put into the pot by the middle class, they could get it back with low cost solar panels and low cost installation. And that would go a long ways, I think, towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Certainly, at least cut back on the use of natural gas. In some cases, you have what's being proposed right now, which is this attempted rollback of the People's Ordinance that was passed back in 1919 during the influenza pandemic. Now, that was good public health policy in 1919, but the city of San Diego, basically, if you're a property owner, you wind up having part of your property taxes going towards paying for trash pickup. Now the city is saying, well, you know what, you're not really paying for trash, and so we want to have a secondary tax levied on you for that, in part because we now have community-wide composting. But the reality is that it's more of a matter of financial mismanagement. We've had a city that gave away $86 million for an asbestos-filled office building that we'll never use. Ultimately, the tab on that may wind up coming to $200 million. So, you have so many poor decisions being made along the line that gets in the way of what would otherwise be probably affordable environmental policy that would also wind up benefiting more people. Electrification is something that we've been moving towards for a long time. How do we do that? With solar. Easiest way to get solar into your house, put it on your roof.
One thing looking at, I grew up with solar panels and electric cars. So I think it was like the one thing that made it hard, though, is you see a lot of the benefits with, solar or having the electric car, like this sticker, for carpooling access, that went away, or
Right, yeah,
those got cut. And it's like,
yeah.
well, I like the environment, but you're making it harder for me to like the environment. So that was just something that I was trying to, get across. I think that, you kind of answered how it's possible to make affordable environmental policy.
So you mentioned mismanagement and bad decisions, and those could be just people bad at their job, and that happens every day at every company and every government.
Yeah.
But there's people who are bad at their jobs, and then there's things that are a little bit more nefarious, and so and that where lobbying comes in and rent sinking comes in, and I wonder, as a candidate, have you been approached by donors that did not break the law, but made it clear that, hey, if you want our support, we're going to need X or Y. We're going to need you, Tommy, to help us with something down the road. Like, have you felt pressure? Like, is it that tangible?
I'm the last guy that anybody would approach for something like that.
Yeah.
I'm after 2 runs for city council, I'm sure it would have come up by now. It hasn't.
Okay.
It
Well,
hasn't come
I
up.
watch too much HBO. I watch too much. That's all. Well, so
I mean, I am not in that airspace where a lot of those people move and operate. I'm on the ground talking with my neighbors. I'm on the ground talking with neighbors who are barely making it month to month, who are on fixed incomes, limited incomes, kids and grandkids that can't find a place to live. I mean, the problems of the middle class, I don't need to tell you guys, they are innumerable. And when you're moving in those airspaces that my opponent is and many other politicians are, you're just not getting a good report of what's happening on the ground. And you're perhaps losing sight of why you're doing this in the first place.
And that dark money and the PAC money insulates you from having to wear holes in the soles of your shoes.
Oh yeah, I was talking to a guy today, and he was working on his car. Walked up to him in his driveway, and I'm like, "Hi, how you doing? I'm Tommy Hough. I'm running for one of your neighbors. I'm running for city council." It's like, "Oh yeah, you stopped by a couple months ago. I voted for you. I voted for you because you're here on the ground. You're out doing this. You're out talking to people. You got my vote." I get that every single day.
Yeah.
People know the difference because I've actually shown up. And when they get 20 mail pieces from somebody who is just a cipher that they know nothing about, they've never shaken their hand, they don't know who they are, they're not aware of any sort of thing they've done for the community, it does make a big difference. And that's really the best way to go and counteract some of that big money. Doesn't always win though.
No, it doesn't. And so how would you, if you did have that magic pen, what would you propose we do at both the local and the federal level about the influence of money in politics?
Well, I think the best thing would be to maybe have a defined campaign season. If you want to make it really fair, but defined campaign season, and perhaps put a limit on the amount that candidates can spend, where they can get their money from, and therefore, and then you make the campaign about issues and ideas, and not who has the loudest trumpet. And I am always confident walking into a room that if I'm dealing with an intellectually honest audience, we're going to win because we've got the issues. And Mike, we're very confident of that. I'm confident now because we know that we've got the best approaches to these issues. But that's what I would like to do with my magic pen, and just get all that nefarious spending out of the political process. I even mentioned that in my interview in the Union Tribune, and I have people from all different political spheres who feel the same way because they don't feel like they don't have hope. They know they're not being heard, no matter what their political affiliation is. It's like, well, nothing's going to change. And so unless you're having, real substantive debates on issues that can't be immediately backed up by a BS, mail campaign over the course of 4 mail pieces, or phone calls, or and at the state and national level, television ads, you name it. So I think if there was a defined campaign season, that may help. But I'll tell you what, part of the reason we're competitive and part of the reason we're in this now is because we started early, early. And that would be my recommendation for anybody running for office.
Yeah, that's great. And hopefully there are people listening, right now, watching right now, that are inspired to run, because we need people on the ground, regardless of party, who know what's wrong and have ideas about how to fix it. And there's a huge barrier, whether it's raising that initial amount of money, whether it's getting the money from the party, it's all tied with special bows and things on
Yeah,
it.
and you put the money into the party. They're not giving you money. You funnel money into them, and then they give it back to you. That's how that works.
Yeah.
When Bill Clinton shows up to speak, he's not doing it for free.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so interesting. Yeah, there's so much to unpack that people don't really understand. One last question. So on Capitol Hill, lobbyists themselves write most of the bills.
Yeah.
Right? Interest groups are writing the farm bill. They're right, the interest groups supporting big pharma or the American Medical Association are writing the healthcare bills. How is it at the city level? Is it the same? Are they writing ordinances? Or is it just they're like, hey, we have this cool scooter that you should put on every corner, and your residents are going to love it?
I don't think we're at that point entirely yet, but obviously there is a subculture within our downtown, which is not unusual. It's in any large any large city's downtown, these interest groups, and they are used to writing policy, and they are used to contributing to policy, and they're used to finding ways to advance that policy. How much of that they might give to a lawmaker in its most complete form, I always think of like Alan Alda in The Aviator, getting his stuff from Pan Am. I don't think it's necessarily that naked, but certainly a lot of those influences are written in. I would also say that there is a professional class of folks who work in political offices. Many of them are good people. They're very, very capable, and they're just used to writing policy. That's what they do, and they're very, very good at it. And honestly, if I wind up succeeding with my race, we're going to need individuals like that who are capable of taking our crazy ideas and making them into policy, workable policy.
Tommy, where can they find you if they want to work for you?
Just go to tommyhough.com. My last name, you can see it. It's spelled Hough. It's TOMMYHOUGH.com. My phone number is on there. My email is on there. Just send me a note. We'll get you in touch with the other Tommy, and we can get you out to helping us out. And I'll tell you, if you're watching this and you're able to make a contribution, we will make it go further than any other campaign, and it means a lot. These signs in the background, this is how we get the message out for a grassroots campaign. And you come up to our neck of the woods, and these things are everywhere because the neighbors know who's looking out for them. And any amount that you can give is a big help.
Well, thanks, Tommy. We appreciate this conversation and you taking the time away from family because I know it's limited during the campaign, and so you know, I hopefully this has really piqued a lot of people's interests about their city and where their money goes, if they do donate, how it's used, and if they don't, how are people raising 300 grand, $1 million to run for city council, right? And
Yeah,
so
when you add all the money in from all the PACs and all the IEs, I mean, it's easily over $1 million, easily. And if you were going to run for Congress, I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're in you're running for the one Liz Cheney's single congressional seat in Wyoming. You're going to need about 3 mil just to get off the ground and a staff ready to go. When you say that, you're going to have that. You're going to have those commitments ready to go. So I don't want to devalue fundraising. You need to have a place where you can go and get funding from. Some candidates are better at it than others, but if you're able to get out early with some considerable monies, that can attract interest with the party and otherwise, and that can make things a lot easier. I didn't mean to interrupt you though, Terry. I'm sorry.
no, that's fine. So with that in mind, one thing that we're toying with between now and 2024 is launching a political metaverse. And what we mean by that is having a place, right? Geographically, your area is pretty vast.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just for City Council of San Diego, right? If you are running for Liz Cheney's seat, that's a whole state, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we're trying to bring down the costs of candidates, right? We call it voter acquisition cost.
Mhm.
Right now, yours is mainly sweat and soles of your feet, right?
Yep.
But we're trying to make it so there's some real economies of scale, and that politicians have a place where they can go. It's safe. You don't have to worry about security, things like that, and where constituents can go and have interesting conversations with one another, but also have office hours with their leaders.
Mhm.
And so, what do you think? We're crazy? I mean, obviously it's a metaverse, so we're kind of crazy. But do you think that that would open the door for more people like you and your neighbors to step up?
Well, it's funny because what you are describing to me sounds like what should be the basic expectation of the job,
Mhm.
that you're making regular times to go and meet with your constituents and your neighbors. And I always tell my neighbors, I go door to door, not only because I have to get the word out, but I got to know what's going on 4 streets over, because it might be a lot different from what I'm dealing with. So no, I don't think you're crazy, and I think that's a positive place to go. Now, in some cases, as you're saying, like if you're running for Liz Cheney's seat, you can't go and knock on every door in Wyoming. Maybe you could. I don't know. It might take a while,
I
but
know you'd kill your horse. It'd probably kill your horse riding around.
yeah, it probably would. Yeah, it's a lot of horseshoes. So I think it depends on the individual, and the individual has to really want to understand and want to behave in a particularly democratic way, because so many of these politicos sort of come, they're like shrink wrap. They're ready to go. Oh, we got my backers. We got the PACs that are supporting us. It's just a matter of hit and go and just saying whatever, you know. And for me, ideas and policy, it's more than currency. It's what we live and breathe on, and it's how we make people's lives better.
Well, we love to hear those things, and it's why we all volunteer, right? Is to try and help people get what they want out of their government. Because as you said, most people don't believe they can, and we cite this study from Princeton that did, I think it was a 40-year longitudinal study, and they took the popularity of a given bill, and so maybe 0% like it, 50% like it, 100% like it, and compared that to the likelihood it got passed. So based
Mhm.
on what bills got passed, what didn't. And so well-liked bills you would think would have a high probability of getting passed. Poorly
Right.
liked bills would be low. And it was literally about 32% of bad bill or poorly liked bills, moderately liked bills, and well-liked bills got passed,
Mhm.
unless you were in the top 1%. It was, yeah, it was like
Uh,
a unit distribution, right? If we're getting nerdy, because I'm an economist, right? And so, but when you took it for the top 10% of the population by income, it was about 70% of the time a bill got passed if it had 100% approval
mhm.
from the wealthy. And that's pretty astounding. But the big number was 0% approval, 0% chance it passed.
Right.
And that's what you talked about, right? There's this whole area we don't talk about, whether it's the oil derricks off the coast, if you're about environmentalism here in California, right? Whether it's things doing with the road. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And so, you know, I don't know if you have time to stick around or not. I don't know if you guys have more questions, but I think you know your people said you had to go after this. So
Yeah, I'm going to have to peace out, but I truly appreciate the conversation. It's very nice to meet you guys. I think it's wonderful what you're doing. And you know, anytime you want to talk more, if I can contribute some more after the election when I have a little bit more of my life available to me, I'd be happy to do that. So
all right, we're writing that down. That's a promise. That's a
let's keep in
campaign
touch.
promise. We're going to hold you to. Awesome.
Thank you so much, you guys. All right, well, I'm just going to drop out, but
Yeah.
have a good rest of your show, okay?
You too, Tommy. Thank you so much.
Take care, my friends.
So, gentlemen, I thought that interview was great. I learned
You
a lot
did
from Tommy.
You did a
and
great job, Terry.
Thanks. You don't have to say that because I'm your boss. And
I didn't realize you were paying me. My boss.
oh, checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail. For using my Zoom account, right?
This is a good point for us to take a moment and talk about what Make Voting Smarter run and how we're about to launch our donation campaign because all of us are volunteers.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you've made it this deep into our podcast, even if it's your first one or your 10th one, if you've tried out our Chrome extension or you used our iOS app in 2020, or you just like what we're doing, you know, we need help. This all takes money. I got to pay Andrew back for his Zoom account. Okay, guys? So at least give us 25 bucks for that. Let's get back. Speaking of money, what did you learn from Tommy tonight that blew your mind or was interesting or was something different than you thought?
Well, you know what, Terry? One thing, a quote that it reminded me of when I was hearing him speak. It came from former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. He was out of Boston. That all politics is local. Not sure if anyone here is familiar with that statement. I know a lot nowadays. People say, you know, that isn't true. Politics is more national now, and you know, and maybe that's true when we're talking about governors and presidents and Congress people. But you know, Tommy, he's running for the position that really affects people the most. Your city council. And what I think people need to look at, and I think Tommy embraced it very well, is that sure, your governors, your Congress people, who you vote for president is important, but those people in Washington D.C. or your state capitals aren't necessarily affecting your day to day lives. The people in your who are in charge of your city, who are in charge of your town, do, and the way he's going about his campaigning, not necessarily, heavy on the mailer, but going out there, knocking on the doors, talking to people. That's the way to do it. And it's very nice to see that he is embracing that in his campaign. Because look, I don't know San Diego. San Diego is I don't know the exact population, but I think it's pretty high up there. Especially much bigger than my small little city of Tamworth, or where I used to live in Manchester.
San Diego has as many people as New Hampshire.
Yeah, exactly.
The state.
So the fact that he's able, so the entire state, so the fact that he's going out there and doing that, I think shows a lot of tact, a lot of integrity, and someone who actually cares about his city. He's not doing it just for a paycheck or just cause.
Yeah, and I think like another thing is like the temptation to pull from special interests. It's apparent. Like it's so easy to put your hands out and say, I will, put X policy out there for $10,000, $20,000 to compete with some of those bigger pockets that other people have. And to say like, no, this is the route we're going. We're going to stick with this kind of grassroots foundation. Win or loss is kind of admirable. But it's also, it's a tough choice. Like to expect everyone to reject, the funding if it means losing once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, when you could have maybe a spot to affect some sort of change, but take that kind of burden on. It's a really interesting challenge for local politics because local politics is a place where not everyone is endorsed. You have to do it yourself. and help becomes that much more significant.
Mhm.
So it's really interesting to see the kind of progression that Tommy's sort of made. I hope he does something impactful.
Yeah, well, it's funny, right? He's running as a Democrat. He's clearly for environmental regulation, right? That's not either of, you guys are both pretty libertarian, it's my understanding, right? So it's not, but the way and same with me, right? But the way his passion is clear, it seems honest, right? It's hard not to root for him, even if his policies aren't necessarily what we all agree with. It that genuineness, I think, really cuts through, and it he's gonna have to knock on 70,000 doors, right? 160,000 voters. That's a lot of hand sanitizer. Those people who say that all politics isn't local and the tip is wrong, they don't know. And what's interesting though is in San Diego they're declared Democrats and they're getting party money, and which is in some cities you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to declare your political party. So yeah, look, I hope we can. We're in talks with several other politicians to get them on and ask them similar questions about money in the race that they're running, how it affects them. I wouldn't expect somebody to say, "Yeah, somebody offered me a bribe," right? But it was clear that Tommy really is averse to big money in his campaign, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see if he can win, right? Because talking to his campaign manager, who's also named Tommy, uh, that's the other Tommy he referenced. I believe his opponents outraised him over 3-1, if you include PAC money, and a lot of it's coming from and Tommy danced around this, but a lot of that money's coming from Amazon because Amazon wants to build a big distribution center down there, allegedly, right? And or it comes from developers who want to develop,
Yeah.
right? And
Uh,
clearly that's not Tommy's jam, right? And so
yeah.
he's not getting that money.
I think that it's so hard though, and if you're in a town, maybe not like San Diego, but another town that where 60, 65, 70% of the population is employed by one or more companies, one or two. Now you're like, it doesn't matter what you can knock on all the doors, but if jobs are on the line,
Like if you work for the railroad in a railroad town, right?
Yeah, and they said it doesn't matter how much you like the politician, it's how much the railroad company does, because that's your only form of income. So it's very interesting that like I don't know if I don't think San Diego is like that. I think there's way more economic diversity, but it's interesting to see how one company can really just influence a huge election, especially if there's 160,000
If mailers and phone calls work, Amazon's putting its finger on the scale, which we saw in our data. It was the number one donor. It donated millions of dollars in 2020. People running for House, Senate, governor, and president. And so there's there's a reason they want to maintain the status quo, and so yeah, I think the causal relationship is imperfectly drawn, right? Like we can't, because that's bribery, right? Unless you got Blagojevich emails, right? We don't really know that it's a quid pro quo. But our gut, our intuition, and our common sense tells us nobody's going to give you $100,000 to be a city council person unless it's going to pay them more than $100,000.
Yeah.
And $650. All right, your cousin's going to write you that check. Right? People who love you are going to write you a check. Your neighbors might support you at $50, but $100,000. That's, you got to get something to get me to write 100 G's, right? And so, yeah, it's really interesting. I really enjoyed tonight's conversation, and it really did point out to us sort of how we might think these national races are impacted by money, but local races are strongly impacted too. And if you're a politician or you work for a politician and you're running for a big office or a small office, we'd love, and you want to tell us about how money impacts your race, we'd love to have you on a future episode of Pocket Politics. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Voting Smarter and reach out or shoot me an email, terry@votingsmarter.org. And we will get you on and we'll ask you a lot of the same questions we asked Tommy, because these questions need to get answered. People need to hear how money is changing things for them directly to better understand why what we're doing is so important. So I want to thank Audit. Those were awesome questions. Andrew, awesome host, as always. Thank you both. Remember, you can find out more about Voting Smarter and our mission at our website, votingsmarter.org. You can find it at Voting Smarter on our socials. And, let's work together to give you your political power back.
Links are in the description, by the way.
Sweet. Yeah. Smash that subscribe button. Thanks,
Good
guys.
stuff.